would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. It's the day after, folks. It's Tuesday, September 27th, 2016. The presidential debates were last night. I hope you all enjoyed them. I will not be talking about them. As always, the best way to get in contact with me is at the website, therebelbroker.com. I've had a couple of folks mention that they have some weird stuff they end up having contend with when they try to send something via the website. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the anti-spam tool that I think is causing the problem. So if any of you have tried to send me messages and you've had trouble, please try again. It's not my intent to complicate your day in terms of how you reach out to me. It's really just when I first opened that up and after the show really started to take off, I started getting tons of spam mail on that thing. So it was really just an effort on my part to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, I guess, a little bit, so that I wasn't spending quite so much time filtering through that. Another alternative is you can also just email me at therebel@therebelbroker.com. That's the address that thing sends to anyway, and I'm obviously happy to share that email address here. So feel free to send anything you want to mention to therebel@therebelbroker.com, and I'll be happy to field it. If you'd rather use the form, you can head on over to therebelbroker.com, click on Contact the Rebel Broker. Send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have. I will be happy to reply. And of course, we are still doing the take the survey to support the show thing. That's the big red button at the top of the webpage. Click on that. You'll be asked to enter your email address and name, and then you'll click a button to take the actual survey where you'll be asked for your email address again. Make sure those two email addresses match, and you will be entered to win a $50 gift card at Amazon on October 1st. So we'll see who wins that. I appreciate those of you who have already jumped in and taken the survey. You're absolutely helping to support the show and make it possible for me to expand what I offer and offer just far more stuff for you to help guide you along in the wonderful world of real estate. We've got kind of an interesting topic today, and it's interesting for a couple of reasons. First is because if you've been a long-time listener to the show, you know that this is one area of real estate that I have always strongly suggested you avoid. Now, I'm talking about mobile homes or manufactured homes. Typically, these are homes on wheels. If you look underneath these things, even when they're installed on their lots, they still have their wheels, and they could still roll away. But there was an interesting article from Bloomberg where they were asking, why aren't we building more mobile homes? And in relation to it solving the affordability crisis. And at first blush, I don't think that's an unreasonable position to take. We've talked about the downsides of mobile homes here. There are absolutely right ways to do mobile homes, but sadly, so much of it is not that. So much of the way mobile homes are managed is not the way you want to buy real estate. But, it's an excellent way to potentially solve the problems relating to affordability. In terms of getting a place that you can live on, you can get 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. There's the famous double wide. I've actually lived in a mobile home before. For 2 years when I was living in college, I lived in a mobile home, and I was perfectly comfortable there. But I think we need to set some ground rules. Now we'll talk a little bit about what Bloomberg has to say. I actually think they're missing the boat on a couple of reasons why mobile homes haven't taken off more than they should or more than they have. And I think a lot of that relates to how these bad boys get financed, at least here in California. And we'll cover that as well. But first, let's talk about the wrong way to buy. Let's not talk about the money for a second. Let's just talk about the units themselves. Well, first, if you're going to buy, and remember, this can be a solution that takes all kinds of different forms for you. This doesn't have to be, I go to a mobile home park and I live in a mobile home park. This could be, I acquire a piece of land and put a mobile home on it with the anticipation that at some point I might build a stick-built home, but in order to lock things in now, we'll get a lot, we'll lock it in at a certain price, we'll live in a mobile home. The only problem is you're going to have to make sure ahead of time that that's going to be allowed. There are some areas that aren't going to let you just plop a mobile home onto into a neighborhood. There are HOAs that absolutely won't permit it. I've actually, in my search for lots, almost all the ones that are in an HOA that I've seen. In fact, I think every single one I've seen that are in an HOA say, mobile homes or manufactured homes are not permitted. So, and this is going to change depending on where you live in terms of what the rules and regs are. But you would absolutely, in terms of total money, be a lot better off than buying a single-family residential home. But here's the reality. Number one, you don't want to buy any mobile homes that were built before about 1976 or 1977 if you're looking at ones that are already in a mobile home community. Primarily because there were different safety regulations that were changed relating to aluminum wiring and other types of things in a mobile home. And the other bottom line is I probably wouldn't want to go with something that was that old anyway, just because there have been so many improvements in the appearance of these things. My parents live in a mobile home park, and it's only the loosest of ways to refer to that place, simply because almost none of these things look like mobile homes anymore. Let me explain. Here in California, or at least in the areas that I've worked in where I have helped people buy and sell mobile homes, there are two ways that mobile homes can be situated. One is as a mobile home, and that means every year you pay the Department of Motor Vehicles registration fees, and if you own the land, you're paying taxes on the lot. And in a lot of places, that'll save you money because you're not paying property taxes on the mobile home because it still has its wheels on it. It still has tags. It has a license plate, all that kind of wonderful stuff. So it's still a DMV thing. It's not a property tax thing. But that's a negative from a lending standpoint. Now, here's one of the big things that I think is one reason that contributes to why mobile homes haven't taken off. These things don't get financed like a home does. These things tend to get financed the way a car gets financed. The logic being that you can literally take the skirts off of the thing, take it off of its jacks, and drive away with it. So, I mean, it's quote unquote personal property. It's basically a slightly permanent version of an RV where you can really drive away with this thing at any time. However, in many places in California, these mobile homes have been converted into real property. In other words, the wheels have been taken off. They've been put on foundations. They've been retrofitted for earthquake safety, all these things. So they don't move anymore. They don't have DMV registration. They've literally been put onto the tax rolls. So now they're covered in property taxes. They are single-family residential properties for taxation purposes, but they're still mobile homes, just stuck on a foundation. The problem is that even once that's been done, you will find most banks will not lend on these things at all, or at least they won't do conventional style loans like on a home loan. There's literally one bank that we did business with forever over in Santa Cruz. I can't remember what it was, but it was actually it wasn't even a conventional bank. No, it was a credit union that served the local area, however they managed to do it, had gotten into a really good relationship with the folks who lived in this particular mobile home park. And everyone owned the land that their unit sat on. They had an HOA, just like most others. But everyone really was converting these things into into real property. So they weren't on wheels anymore. So that's number one. I think one of the big barriers is getting financing, because normally you're going to be paying much higher interest rates for the loan that you're going to get for these things. And normally you can't get the super long interest rates. So once you mix those super long terms, you're not going to get a 30-year loan on one of these things. So the reality is what you end up paying is on a month-to-month basis, maybe for a much shorter time. But for a lot of folks, it may come ridiculously close to what they would pay for a typical single-family residential home in terms of monthly payments, but obviously just not for the same term. So the month-to-month expenses may feel less sexy to folks taking this route. The other side of this equation is, and in order for this, I think, to work, if we're ever going to convince lending institutions that these are safe loans once they've been converted to real property, is that the owner must own the land, or it must at least be a condo-style relationship where everyone owns sort of the inseparable portion of the land that the community is situated on. You should never purchase a mobile home unless unless those are the circumstances under which your unit sits on the land. There should never be a situation where someone else can tell you to get off of the land because you don't own it. If you're paying rent just to have your mobile home on the land, at some point that person who owns the land may decide, you know what, I'd rather build houses on this land, and ultimately through you exercising various rules within the HOA, kick you out and be able to do just that, which is exactly what happened to a bunch of folks who lived in a mobile home park in Santa Cruz, who had in many cases paid $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 for these mobile homes that were situated with beautiful ocean views right on a cliff overlooking the ocean, but they didn't own anything but the mobile home. And for the vast majority of them, those mobile homes were worth nothing. In fact, in some cases, you'd have to pay someone to take them away because they were so old that that their value on the secondary market was virtually zero. So you'd literally throw away hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in best case scenario, own a mobile home that was worth maybe a couple of $1,000s to someone. So horrible way to find renting, in my book, for the vast majority of mobile home situations is preferable to buying a mobile home. So the ideal situation, to sum it up, is you own the land. The unit is of a newer pedigree. I'd round it up to say 1980 or newer. I'd actually go even newer than that. I've been in mobile homes or manufactured homes that were built after 1995, and the difference is gigantic. Somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s, there was apparently sort of a shift in the way these things got built, and they're far better. They feel far more like a conventional home once you get inside of them. Now, there's still that whole extra long, they're typically 600 and something square feet, and you put two of them together, you end up with 1,200 square feet. And I think I've even seen triple wides that can accommodate, obviously, say a 3-bedroom, something bigger. But these would absolutely be something to fill the gap if we had more communities that were okay with them even existing on lots. And we'd have to be banks, because these are the things, right? So Bloomberg makes these suggestions, but it makes the suggestions without really a reality check on what it takes to make this happen. So you've got the community angle to deal with, but then you've also got lending institutions that need to be updated and at least have some sort of policy that allows for mobile homes to be serviced if it meets certain criteria, which would be the criteria we've talked about, that's on land that is either owned by the HOA or owned by all the folks together in a condo type situation, and it's younger than a certain age. I don't even with the converted ones, if the wiring hasn't been upgraded from the aluminum wiring from the pre-76 units, you can't get a loan on it. So those are things that we would have to jump through in terms of hoops to make it possible for the one institution, the one credit union that we had found in Santa Cruz that would do it. The wiring had to be upgraded, it had to be converted to real property, those types of things. And even in those scenarios, you were still paying a bit of a premium in terms of interest rate for getting a loan there, just because there wasn't really any other competition. So those are some of the obstacles I see from my ground truth here in California. But let's step back, take a look at what Bloomberg has to say. Now, they start off mentioning West Virginia. where these apparently are a little bit more common in terms of acceptance and usage. So a little more than 1,000 mobile homes last year were delivered to West Virginia. Over that same period, home builders obtained permits to build about 2,000 single-family homes. So you do the math real quick. That ends up being 1/3 of the homes added to the state's housing stock last year being mobile homes. Now, other states where this is far more common, West Virginia is at about 1/3. Mississippi is about a number of 1/3 in terms of single families that were permitted in 2015. Louisiana at about 25%, Kentucky at 25%, Alabama at just over 20%, New Mexico at just over 20%, and Arkansas at just about 20%. So now that's kind of interesting. You can see that in some parts of the country, these things are clearly a far bigger part of the home pie than in other areas. Now, the average sales price for a brand new mobile home was $67,800 in April, and that's compared with an average sales price of $380,000 for a site-built home. Now, that's for the unit itself. Now, remember, a mobile home doesn't come with land. I'm guessing this number is just for the mobile home. I'm not sure if that means it was on land that you owned as well in these various areas. That would be an interesting number to know. But no matter how you slice it, you're coming in at a far cheaper price point, probably with more. And if you do it from a price per square footage standpoint, there's no question in my mind that you're spending a whole lot less on a mobile home. Now, 3/4 of mobile home residents have household incomes of less than $40,000 a year. Mobile homes, which actually aren't very mobile, are most highly concentrated in the South. More than 500,000 of them are in California, the most in the country. But in recent years, new mobile home sales have made up a large share of the housing market in southern states, as we discussed earlier, in terms of the states with the biggest percentage of the new homes being mobile homes. So in addition to all that, one of the big blocks, I think, is sort of a stigma that's attached to mobile homes, trailer homes, mobile homes, manufactured housing. For a lot of folks, this is considered just not the kind of house someone wants to live in. But, given the circumstances we're in now, it's interesting to look at the numbers and realize, A, it could absolutely fill a need, and B, could it possibly be an actually decent investment? Now, we're going to go ahead and talk about it in a second. We're going to take a quick break here for a message, so don't go away. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner-broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. Sort of doing a quick review of a Bloomberg article that talked about mobile homes. And we're just sort of batting around the idea. All the advice I've given relating to mobile homes has typically been to avoid them, except for very, very specific circumstances. And maybe I need to step back a little bit from that. Maybe mobile homes will represent a decent opportunity for you, either as someone who just wants to buy or someone who just wants to find a place that they can purchase to fix their housing costs. Obviously, we've already covered some of the essentials. We've covered the issues that might be surrounding financing, its status as either a vehicle, quote unquote, that's handled through the DMV or been converted into real property. We've converted what's the status of the land it's sitting on. Do you own it? Is there any way someone could sell that land out from under you without your consent, which is something you absolutely don't want to spend any money on, because that's a bad bet. You don't want to bet on what someone else decides to do with property you live on. What's interesting, I think, is if you look at just the cycle of mobile homes and you look at what's been going on with them, they absolutely represent a good opportunity. Because remember, what's one thing we've talked about in the past? Take the path that's been less traveled or that fewer people are going to. And, mobile homes absolutely qualify for that kind of an assessment. Now, if you're someone who's really wanting to get a single-family residential home, maybe these aren't going to do it for you. But also, maybe you can find yourself a community that doesn't feel like a mobile home park. As I said, my parents live in a mobile home park that doesn't feel like a mobile home park at all. We're talking units that have been so modified from their original form that they're 2-bedroom homes. Some of them look stick built. I mean, it's really kind of amazing. If you ever want to check it out, it's called Monte Valley in Scotts Valley, California. Feel free to Google it. I'm pretty sure they've got their own website. And it's a senior community, so it's 55 and over. But these places are going for $550,000, $600,000. So these are not inexpensive units. But again, you own the land that it's on. There's no weird mobile home, typical, stereotypical mobile home stuff really associated with these. And I guess we could have sort of a philosophical question about, is it a bad thing that the prominence of mobile homes has sort of slid past us? And and I'm not sure that it has. There's a lot of negative feelings about mobile homes. They have a controversial past. They had a reputation for selling poor customers shoddy products with expensive loans. The history of leasing the land that the units are on. But given the current situation relating to available properties, is this an opportunity for folks to sort of revitalize mobile homes? Now, even as I say that, inside I almost want to laugh a little. I still absolutely personally have a perception of mobile homes. There are plenty of mobile home parks here in Morgan Hill that are the stereotypical, little boxes just wedged right next to each other at that weird little angle that they always seem to put mobile homes. But it seems to me that they could absolutely fill a niche for folks who want to get that single family home going, but need to do it on the tightest budget possible. So I think if it was me, I'd be looking for land, and then I'd be looking to put a mobile home on it. Now, the downside is you're probably not going to be able to do the suggestion I made months ago when we were talking about the process I was thinking about using to get a brand new home built. You're probably not going to be able to get yourself into a situation where you're going to be able to get that kind of financing, where you'll be able to finance the buying of a piece of property and then have that rolled into a typical mortgage because you're putting a manufactured home on it. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, manufactured homes were not even included as a possibility under my options. So then you find yourself back at the financing question again. Suddenly, you have to have enough money on hand to buy a lot, which by and large means 50% of the purchase price of the lot. Then you've got to figure out and of course you'll be able to get a loan. The place, if you buy one brand new, they're going to have financing options available for you. But then you still have to jump through those hoops. So it's, despite the fact we'd be having something that's aimed at someone who's trying to get into this inexpensively, what we end up with is a very front-loaded financial experience, meaning that a lot of the money you're going to spend on this isn't going to be spent over the course of a 30-year mortgage. A lot of it's going to be spent on the front end, just getting the thing set up so you can start living in it. But, for a minute, let's take a look at the realities. I went to a site, thehomesdirect.com, put in the number of bedrooms and bathrooms that you're looking for, and I'm seeing mobile homes listed at $49,900, $56,900, one that looks like a house for $69,900. I'm seeing one here for $74,900 that's got a two-car garage, it looks like, associated with it. Comes in two sections. It's 30 feet by 58 feet, 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, 1,700 square feet. Let's see, I see another one here that almost looks like a Craftsman-style home, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1,600 square feet, $69,900. So, and a lot of these are these are not the mobile homes that you're so familiar with. And you cannot beat that price. I mean, that's a crazy price. But let's talk about what they can do for you in terms of financing to see how realistic this is for you. Now, in reviewing this, the wide, wonderful world of mobile homes has come a long way. And it's looking like, from what I'm seeing on different websites, like there's the Fleetwood Homes, which is sort of a mobile home manufacturer. I don't think mobile home, I'm not sure that term really even applies anymore. But they talk about if it's done correctly, you actually can qualify for a conventional mortgage. Some of them are even mentioning FHA, VA. So if this is something you wanted to go through and do yourself, it absolutely sounds like a realistic possibility. I think one problem comes in is when you're talking about older setups. So if you were looking at buying something that was existing, I think you're saving yourself the greatest amount of money in doing that. But I also think you're potentially taking a far more risky path. So what does this mean for us? Well, in terms of investments, I actually think that if you were going to do a brand new project, I mean, in my quick view of different sites that sell these things, these places look absolutely fine. And in the descriptions I'm reading, they meet all building codes. And in fact, most cases, they exceed building codes because they're built to the toughest codes in the country so that they can install these things anywhere in the country. So if you're buying in a state that tends to have more lax codes, you're still going to get a structure that's going to be built to the same kind of standard that's expected in states that have much higher expectations. The real question is just going to be, how do you manage this process? But again, that's more leaning towards the investor. If you want to go out and find yourself a piece of land and put it on it, and you're going to need to make sure that you're allowed to do that kind of a thing and that path is clear for you, that may actually be an interesting thing. I mean, the more I look into this, the new way, the new face of quote unquote mobile homes, not modular. Now remember, there's three different terms. There's mobile homes, manufactured homes, and modular homes. Now, modular homes are pretty much stick-built homes that are just built in a factory and then they're assembled on site. Manufactured homes are really what more comes into the classical definition of what a mobile home is, but the way they install these things today isn't like the old days. It's not like the old mobile homes where they were on wheels, they roll them up, they park them, and they put them up on jacks. All the ones I'm seeing here tend to be put onto an actual foundation. So they're starting out differently than what the classic definition of mobile homes are really all about. But the reality is that we're faced with tons of different communities that aren't like that are still the old model. I would guess that probably a huge chunk of those also are of the old model where you don't own the land, you're leasing the land. That's probably why a lot of these are still here. So how do we move forward? I'm not sure this is really a show that comes down to advice for buyers, sellers, and investors. It's really maybe an exploration of maybe what we need to do is to embrace this idea that if you, now in my area, let's take, because I'm trying to get numbers for you here, right? Now, I threw out some numbers earlier. I did a quick search on some of these manufactured homes, and the prices were ridiculously good. But you also have to add that to the cost of acquiring the land. Now, if I were to plop the average $70,000 unit that I saw on that website onto a half-acre lot here in Morgan Hill, there is no question that I would be out of pocket probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, when those lots come available, and those are not all the time, I would probably be $460,000 into that. And given what I know that would cost in terms of mortgage, and that would be for at least a 3-bedroom. Remember, I was looking at nothing but 3-bedroom, 2-bath units, which is the meat and potatoes search that goes on out there for folks to rent. I would absolutely be positive cash flow. I would absolutely be paying a whole lot less than anyone else who's paying rent right now. So I think the problem is that there's a stigma that doesn't just exist for these kinds of properties in terms of public opinion, but I think there's also a regulatory bias against these homes. Now, and I can't find anything that would indicate that if we focus just on the modern iterations of these things, that we would be providing substandard housing for anybody. In fact, the argument appears valid that the reality is you'd actually be providing what appears to be more stable, reliable structures than even a lot of stick-built homes. I'm not seeing a lot of difference in terms of what you get. Now, some of you may have more experience with this marketplace. I do not have a lot of experience with this segment of the market. So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. But what do you think? Is this the way out for us? Is this really the way to get more affordable housing? And what will it take for this sort of thing to be more acceptable? Are we going to be able to solve the supply problem? Remember, we've talked about inventory being the problem. Can we, or at least housing units? I mean, even if we don't want to talk about what folks buy, just getting folks into homes. Is this an acceptable way to go? And is this something we should stress? Or should we continue to push for maybe more easy paths for conventional manufacturers to come in and build what they need to build? I think it's a valid question. And personally, I would have no problem with getting a more general acceptance of these types of structures across the board, just to make it easier for folks to get in and get into homes and lock in their housing costs so they're not going so crazy. So I don't know. I'd love to end this with an answer of this is exactly what we should do. I've absolutely got my opinion, and I absolutely have a bias related to my old school experience with what mobile homes are, which really doesn't seem to fit the bill anymore. So maybe we all just need to sort of re-educate ourselves on what modern modular / mobile homes really are. All right, folks, I absolutely appreciate you spending your valuable time with me for at least a little bit of the time Monday through Friday. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.